I'm Lawrence Francis, host of Interpreting Wine, welcoming you to the South Africa Winemaker special series. Across these 4 episodes, recorded in February 2023, we'll be exploring the modern South Africa scene in the company of 4 producers, reflecting the up-to-date realities of winemaking in the country, with guests chosen to reflect a range of locations, production scales, and philosophies. Undoubtedly the most up-to-date exploration of South African wine, available anywhere in podcast format. Subscribe to be alerted when new series episodes go live. We kick things off today in the company of Tinashe Nyamudoka of Kumusha Wines. We hear Tinashe's origin story in his native Zimbabwe, before he takes us into his relocation and the beginning of his wine training in South Africa. We take a deep dive into one of the most formative experiences at Test Kitchen. We get a deep dive into Kumusha wines and Opstal wines, where the wines are made. We get a Slanghoek Valley visual tour. We talk viticulture and winemaking, Harvest 2023, creating a brand from scratch, exporting and feedback from the UK, and the documentary which features Tinashe, Blind Ambition. Enjoy.
My name is Tinashe Nyamudoka. I was born and bred in Zimbabwe. I grew up in Harare. Mm-hmm. And I moved, but growing up, the upbringing was just, middle-class family, but no wine involved, literally no wine. We went to restaurants, maybe a KFC or chicken in there. It was never this fine dining table service. So after finishing my school, I then worked in retail stores back in Harare. But 2008, if you go into the history books, is probably one of the toughest years Zimbabwe had. And I was working in a retail, so I saw firsthand how the shelves were empty. Then I decided to make the journey down south to South Africa. So most of the people in Zimbabwe were leaving to the UK, US, but for me, I couldn't get there. So the easiest route for me to go was South Africa. Mm-hmm. I only knew one friend in Cape Town. I'd never traveled outside of the country before. So it was a long bus journey from Harare to Johannesburg. It's a day. From Johannesburg to Cape Town, another day.
Wow.
And I landed up in Cape Town early 2008. And, you go there, I was starting to look for jobs. Jobs were difficult to get by. My first job, which I got, was baking bread in a spa, in a retail chain. So I was baking bread in the morning, but, you're in an environment where you feel this is not where you're supposed to be. But luckily, my roommate was working in a wimpy restaurant. Mm-hmm. And come every day with some money, and I'm calculating his daily wage and tips was almost equivalent to my weekly wage at the spa. Okay. So I knew I needed to find work somewhere else and in restaurants. And I told you earlier, I didn't have any experience of a restaurant. I knew zilch about wine. I knew zilch about I was lucky and fortunate that one of the restaurants I'd sent my CV to, which was newly opening, it's called the Roundhouse Restaurant. It was in Kemps Bay. We're just looking for people without prior experience and knowledge, but some people with keen enthusiasm because they were willing to teach. And that's where I got my first restaurant job. It was at the Roundhouse. And obviously, because of no experience, they put me in the back of house, polishing cutlery, polishing glasses, passing in food and clearing tables. Mm-hmm. But it is in that time when I was going into the restaurant dining room, I would see people enjoy, and they're talking, enjoying the food, they're enjoying the wines, and you had this guy as sommeliers serving the wine. For me, it was really something unique. It was cool that food and wine would make people converse like that. So I was really drawn into that. But my real connection to wine and why I wanted to study wine was more for financial, because I realized if I needed to work on the restaurant floor, I needed to understand food, I needed to understand wine. And because those guys taught us about wine in a very unique way that I still remember it. So they were teaching mostly Africans who'd never been in a restaurant before. And they were designing this program they called Let's Sell Lobster. And in the training modules, they they equated wine varietals to animals of the kingdom. So, for instance, they'll say a Cabernet Sauvignon is like an elephant. Elephant is the thick skin. Cabernet Sauvignon is thick skin. Cape Sauv is bold, is elegant, and or Chardonnay is like the African eagle. You know, it eats fish, so Chardonnay goes with fish. It's colorful and king of all grapes. So for me, I was like, I know the animals of the kingdom. This should be easy to learn. And I kind of took it in my stride. And obviously, then I got moved on. I was waitering 1 or 2 tables. With experience, I was able to communicate wine, but which was difficult in the beginning because I didn't know what an asparagus looked like. I didn't know blackberries, black currants. So that visual association of fruit and flavors was very difficult. And I remember, because I remember that I was working in a bakery, so it was in a supermarket. I would go to the fruit and veg section on my off days and find, okay, this is a black currant. Okay, these are gooseberries, and literally smell them and kind of trying to educate myself. So I would say that was the entry point for me for wine. It was through hospitality, through a restaurant. And and I was so fortunate that the restaurant I worked for was high end, so the wines were top class. And unlike many people who started on sweet wine and maybe some other blanc, I started on the good stuff. So I always had a palate that was really, sensitive to taste. So from then on, I then changed places. I joined the One and Only Hotel, which was opening in 2009. And for me, that's where I really connected wine to a profession, because there were a whole wine team dedicated to wine service, sommeliers, butlers, wines. And that's where I really saw the progression of myself in the wine industry as a sommelier profession. And that's where I started to doing wine school, Cape Wine Academy, WSET courses, was during then. And I was so fortunate I had good guys who helped me through, Eric Potter, and Andre Becker, who were the senior sommeliers there, really took me under the wing. And from then on, I didn't just look back. I spent 4.5 years at the One and Only. Then I found a job in Durban, KZN, as the head sommelier. Then I moved back to Cape Town and joined the Test Kitchen restaurant by Luke Dale Roberts, which then was one of the best restaurants if not the best restaurant in Africa and South Africa for years. So I worked there for 4.5 years. And I think that's where I really honed my skills and got to this profession and this person I am today.
I love it. Yeah. And it's, I think it's, such a condensed, way that you've told the story there, which is great for the podcast. But I think it as well just shows to me, and I think, will show to the people listening, just how quickly things can change, just how quickly your life can take a complete different direction. I'm also happy that you've, mentioned some of the mentors and some of the experiences that you've kind of had along the way. So, I hope it will be, quite inspiring to people out there who, maybe, have an interest in wine or think they might want to do something in wine. And I think, stories like this, things can change pretty quickly, I think, if you set your mind to it. So for sure. Love that you shared that.
I'm testament to that.
And this I guess is really the takes us to the door of your current role. So maybe continue the story on from the test kitchen, and maybe I think make the link between what were some of the specific experiences there that then maybe led you into doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, so Test Kitchen was quite pivotal in the way that, my progression then on was more of a student. You're learning, and, you looking at these big personalities in wine, the Jancis Robinsons, the Tim Atkin, and you're learning all the time, but you haven't developed your own identity, or I hadn't formulated my own taste, and, you always looking for someone's opinion for it to be an enjoyment, of which I realized, I need to own my own taste. I need to understand the wines that I love. And for me, when I realized that it was almost a freedom of taste, if I may so, because all along I've been told to taste wine and pick up black currants and blackberries. But I'm saying in my tasting of wine, I'm smelling matamba, I'm smelling majanje, I'm smelling maroro. These are indigenous foods that I grew up eating in Zimbabwe. And the moment I started to do that, I'm not sure if your wine drinking, you've experienced it. Like once you start tasting wine in your own terms, in your own understanding, there's a certain level of enjoyment and a certain level of connection, and that's where your emotions come to play. So you can't be emotionally connected to a beverage if you're trying to think of what a blackberry smells like. So for me, I think Test Kitchen did that to me specifically because the approach Luke Dale Roberts had with his food, in terms of where he's getting it from, the taste profile, the combinations. So it made me understand wine in a certain equivalent way. And the fact that food and had culture, had origin, had place, I realized I was missing a bit of my culture, because at work I'm serving foie gras and, this fancy food. But when I'm at home, I'm eating sadza and murio. This is a local tradition, but I'm still enjoying the wine. So all of this thing makes sense to me. But when I was at that position that I was so confident in myself and could articulate my taste in my own way, I think that's where I thought I should come up with a wine brand that can help me drive this movement. And that's the genesis of Kumusha wines. And Kumusha means your home, your roots, your origins. And I really wanted to connect with my roots and my origin in terms of the food, the place, and life in its entirety. And I remember that time as well, I was reading a book. I'm not sure if you've read it, by Jonathan Nozieta. It's called Liquid Memory.
No, so it sounds interesting. I'll add it onto the list.
There's this chapter he spoke about wine of origin. In the wine world, we all know wine of origin is where the wine and the grapes are being grown. But he says, what if you've never been there? So my early study of wine was reading about the Mosel Valley, about Burgundy and Bordeaux in a book. I'd never been there. I could only immerse myself in there. But he's also saying wine of origin could be where the wine takes you. And remember now, I was smelling a glass, and it was taking me back home with my grandfather in the mountains, picking these wild fruits. And that's the reason I said, okay, if the wine is taking me home, I might as well call the wine Kumusha. So that was the idea of the brand. Then obviously I needed to have the liquid form, and I don't own any vineyards in South Africa. And I knew a friend of mine I'd known in the winemaking. His name is Opstal. He's the chief winemaker at Opstal. And I said, Ati, I want you to teach me the art of winemaking, the art of blending. And in my mind at that time, because I tasted quite a lot of wines in my life up to that point, some that I really loved. So in my mind, I could envision, I could taste, and I could smell the wine I wanted to put in a bottle. So it was almost a fact of getting the right product with the right quality and blending to almost get to that taste and style. So he was so gracious in helping me getting the juice which he was using. So my earliest 2 vintages are almost working with wines that he had picked and matured and blending myself. But as time has progressed, now I'm up. Next week I'll be starting to pick my 6th vintage. So with time and originality, I've learned to understand their vineyards. I invested in my own barrels. I know which specific blocks I want to work with, when to pick them, how long to mature them. And the brand has just evolved. Like I said, I'm in my 6th vintage now. So it's really amazing.
I love it. And again, we've taken this huge leap on again with the story, and there's tons of questions that are going through my mind, and tons of ways that I could kind of lead the conversation. But I think that maybe the next logical place is actually to describe what is the brand now. I mean, you've already said that you don't own vineyards. So what is the brand? How does it sort of work on a slightly more operational level in terms of where are the wines coming from? Where are indeed the grapes coming from? Who's involved? Give us a sense of that side of the business.
So the home of Kumusha wines is at Opstal Winery. It's in the Viticulture region, in the smaller Slanghoek ward. We call it the Snake's Corner because we almost encapsulated with two mountains on each side, the Slanghoek Mountain, the Batsbeek Mountain. So that's where the home of the wine is. So I have nine SKUs in my range, and 6 of them are a wine of origin from that property. And like I said, because I don't own vineyards, and for me, wine of origin aspect is where the wine is taking from. So I have 3 other wineries that I work with because I know, for instance, I work with David Sadi for my Pinotage. He's in the Swartland area. And I know the Slanghoek can make the best Pinotage outside of South Africa, but I work with David closely. He gives us the fruit. We bring it to Opstal, crush and mature the wines there. I work with another vineyard called the Sondagskloof region. It's a very small little ward towards the tip of the African continent. And it's so peculiar, it's so typicity driven that I needed that Sauvignon Blanc. So we do the same, get the fruit from there, and everything is happening. Bottling and maturation happens at Opstal as well. And I think Ati has much more influence on the winemaking side because I'm not a very qualified winemaker. But like I said, I take the decision in the vineyards I want to use, the picking dates, the vessels we use, and most importantly, I'm the chief wine blender.
So you have the final say. You have I think we call it the casting vote. The decisions always come back to you.
Yeah, pretty much so. Pretty much, it's always, I think, a consultative affair. But like I said, I've designed my range of wines to almost mimic my journey in wine and put out wines that I personally enjoy. And I'm not. You're not looking to get the market detect of what you're putting. So for instance, you have the Flame Lily and the Huruza. And these are my personal taste, my wines that I put heart and soul in almost designing them. And you wish that the consumer likes. Then I have my middle range, which I'm really showcasing wine of origin and how different they are. It's the Sondagskloof I mentioned. It's the Swartland Pinotage. It's the Stellenbosch Bordeaux style blend. And I have what I call my lifestyle brand, which are usually colorful, screw cap. And, we as professionals, once you get your knowledge of wine up there, you tend to forget that you started off as a novice. And when you were as a novice, all you wanted was a good wine that tasted really good. You didn't want a thought-provoking wine. And I know that style of wine, so I always keep that range for that consumer.
I love it. And I think I want to definitely save some time to talk about all of those things in terms of a brand, in terms of communication, and also in terms of like bringing new people into wine as well, which I think is, a huge issue, for regions all around the world. But, while we're, still talking about production and and you've kind of, told us about where the grapes are coming from. I wonder if you wouldn't then give us a visual, really. You've already hinted, and this area known as Snake's Corner. What does it look like? And I guess also maybe start with that kind of, I guess, drone's eye view. Where are we kind of talking about geographically, and then also what's it like, sort of, if you're stood there in that region, what are we sort of surrounded by? What are we seeing?
Oh, yeah. So the Slanghoek Valley is pretty much an hour's drive from Cape Town. So we around 100 kilometers that are round about as a crow flies south from the ocean. So we don't have any view of the ocean at all. So it's mainly inland. But what's so lovely about it and what drew me into it is just the picturesque. As you just enter into the valley, you've got 2 mountains on your side, and the valley floor is just pure because the soil is so pure. It's so poor. All they do is plant vines. So vines mostly on the riverbed, what was once the riverbed.
Mm.
On the slides you get the slopes, and usually we farm on the eastern side, on the eastern slope, because on the other side is pretty much nature reserve. You can't really plow on them. So the farm goes from one mountainside to the other mountainside, and depending where you are, you can catch the morning sunrise or you can catch the late sunset. And yeah, I think it's so varied in terms of the soils and its aspect in itself. So you finding in the valley bed, because it was a previous valley, so it's much more sandy, more loam style. But as you move on the mountain edges, it becomes more sandstone, a bit of clay, and what we call Malmesbury shale, which is a shale that's more reddish in color. And in terms of taste also, it determines we generally feel the vineyards on the valley floor gives you that ripeness because they are sun-baked. But on the slopes, we're getting that mineral tension, that fresh acidity to blend the wines as well.
Wow, yeah, and it sounds like, as you say, what I would characterize as a tapestry, where you've got different aspects and different influences that can kind of be played with as well. And you've even mentioned in our pre-chat that you've got a sort of a snow-capped mountains in the winter to kind of bring, I guess, all important freshness and water really into that region.
Exactly. So unlike, what's the biggest advantage of the valley is because of these two mountain ranges and further away from the water, we get a longer ripening season. So for instance, the rest of Stellenbosch and some other parts of South Africa have started harvesting already. And they're probably 3 weeks into harvest, and we haven't started even picking our grapes. So we usually the latest to start and usually the last to start. So we've got a longer growing and ripening season, and that for us helps us in keeping our acidity and getting fruit and optimal ripeness. So I generally feel for drinkability and off the block wine, there's no better wine region in South Africa than the Breede Kloof.
I love it, and it certainly, I think, explains a lot of that variation, and I think it's great to see, as you say, a month's difference in the start of harvest, and that I think says a lot to regionality. So this is a great conversation, I think, to have at the start of this series to really, I think, reinforce to people about the diversity of fruit and subsequently wines that do come from South Africa. I mean, it's something I'll put out there. I think that often some New World regions, they can suffer from the marketing that they, I guess, went with at the start of their journey. That they were maybe kind of value driven. That these were kind of crowd pleasing wines. There's often a similar thread that I'm picking up, producers in Australia and South Africa, for example. But I think that this is great. This conversation is really helping to, I guess, tell that story that, okay, you may start off with a value driven approach, but within now, with all of the advances that have happened and just where the industry is now, that there's quality, there's diversity, and there's some really cool and interesting things happening, not least from your own brand.
Exactly. No, I totally agree.
Very cool. So let's again, as we're talking about production, so we've spoken about the sites and what it looks like there. It sounds beautiful, as most wine regions are around the world. Let's talk about the cellar. Let's talk about and also the viticulture as well. So maybe linking those two together. What can you say about the sites that are sourced for your particular wines?
Yeah, so I would say that the farm itself is around 150 hectares, and it's a monoculture. So it's planted with predominantly about 60 hectares of vines. There's a bit of apples, peaches, and some persimmons as well. And like I said, because it's a vast area and distinctively in terms of topology, the majority of our grapes are hand harvested. I think we've got in the region itself, the Bredekloof, one of the majority of old vines, and old vines in South Africa, we're terming them 35 years plus. And the oldest vineyard at Opstal was planted in 1981, which is the Carl Everson, the flagship one. And because we in a very much more, like I said, the climate it's not dry like you get in the Swartland, or it's not as free airflow like you get in the Stellenbosch area. So we do battle with elements, natural elements, but we farm as sustainably as we can. We don't use herbicides or pesticides willingnessly. We don't use pesticides at all. So we have natural predators walking through the vines. But like I said, it's pretty much the rest of South Africa to go 100% organic and biodynamic. I know probably one or two farms in South Africa going that route. But again, it's the old adage of, do you want to farm sustainably and have 7 generations of winemaking, or you want to go pretty much organic and fight the natures and not have business at all? So I say, vineyard work is more sustainable than organic. And we've got a contingent of staff that's permanent there, about 60, 70 permanent staff who work the vine. So it's a 7-generation farm. And we wanted to go even more generations to come. And if you don't farm sustainable, you don't get that. So there is a team of, so the Law family has Stanley Law, who's the patriarch. Ati Law then took over as winemaker, one of his sons. Then you get Zach, the other brother, who's more of the viticulturist and maintains the vines. And coming into the cellar, like I said, most of the wines you get into Kumusha bottle and most of the estate are all hand harvested. They come into the cellar. We don't add any additives at all. We use natural yeast that's very prevalent in our area. So we don't use any spontaneous fermentation at all. And we're trying to move away from wood as much, or I try with my Kumusha label. So I make use mostly of open tank fermenters. There's very, very old open tank fermenters we use pretty much for our red wine extraction. So the disadvantage of the Slanghoek Valley is we're not as ripe and intense warm as Stellenbosch is. So in terms of fruit profile for our red wines are more red fruit, red currants, cherries. So they don't handle wood that much. And because of that ripeness, we've got drinkability. So my cap, for instance, is all open tank ferment, natural ferment. I've introduced some concrete tanks as well to play around with some skin contact. And we use much more of the foodrest, usually the 3000, the 2005. It's not to impact wood, but just to get the wine settled. We do have a portion of new wood that I use for my flame lily, but it's just one barrel. And most of the fermentation is either a tank ferment or we're fermenting in foodrest as well. And like I said, we pretty much trying to farm as natural as we can in the cellar. And I always like to have an array of different styles. If for instance, I'm making a Chenin, we pick in different stages in one vine, or we ferment them in different vessels. I need a skin contact tank. I need a foodra. I need a small barrel tank. And I tell you, when I'm blending the Chenin, I have about 16 different components in the same cellar of different style and techniques we want to use. Like I said, Ati is a chief, chemistry kind of guy. But we work closely together, and my always advice to him is to give us as much taste profiles as possible. And so that's pretty much what happens in the cellar. And at the end of the maturation, we sit around the table, taste and blend together and bottle at the farm. And, we're waiting for that order to ship to the UK.
I love it. Yeah, this is really cool because yeah, it's taking us right the way through, and maybe just the sort of, for me, the final question on the production, because of, our timing here, as you already mentioned, pre harvest. Do you then go and spend time down there during the harvest and during that process, or is this something that you kind of, I guess, yeah, leave to the guys on the ground, and then obviously have more of a hands-on approach when it comes to those blending decisions?
I love harvester. I think harvesting, I equated to my time on the restaurant floor. Like
Yeah.
you meet service, you've got, I don't know how many tables in the restaurant, all need your attention, and you gotta serve wine there, you gotta pour, you gotta recommend. And there's this energy you get during harvest. And, it's those close calls. Okay, it's raining now. The Cabernet Sauvignon is bursting, is rotting, but the Rossani is ready. Which one must we go for? So I always love that about harvesting. So I'm there, not 3 months in full. So I try to break around. So now I'm going for the beginning, and I'm coincidentally going with my harvesting of the Roussan, my favorite cultivar at the farm. So I'll spend 3 weeks, then travel and sell the wine, then come back when my rates are coming as well, and check on the ferments and check on the profile. But as of 2023 vintage is just looking beautiful. I was in Cape Town 2 weeks ago, and yeah, it's just exciting. So I would never love to miss harvesting because of the adrenaline.
I love it. And, as for me, the best conversations always go, I think, everything that you said and hinted at before now, leads into, I guess, the final stage, which is, all around, I guess, selling and, bringing everything that you've spoken about there into, the brand and starting to have those sorts of conversations. So, I know that you do export wine to the UK, which I think is definitely a part of the story that I would like to talk about. But I think maybe first, take us inside, that role that you have there, I guess locally, within South Africa, in terms of how are those wines then getting out into South African hands and sitting on South African tables?
Yeah, to tell you the truth, Lawrence, if someone had told me that the difficult part about wine is selling it and convincing people to buy it, and a good close friend of mine, Mike Radcliffe, who owns Villa Fonte, warned me at the beginning and said, Tinashe, you're excited about selling the first one. You come back to me when you've sold the third bottle of wine to the same person.
Yeah.
And it was just true, man. Selling wine is just the most difficult part. And I found it in South Africa because there's the history attached to the country. I don't own a vineyard. And imagine I'm just coming out of nowhere. I'm saying, this is my Kumusha, drink it. And the first question they ask you, where's your farm? Where's your vineyard? So I had to struggle with that first and really try to bring my experience and passion into it. And that to make wine, you just don't need the heritage, the provenance, and the craftsmanship as well. You need the skill of selling it. You need the skill of convincing people to buy it. So I haven't cracked South Africa yet because it's just too difficult for young brands coming up. Larger distributors don't take you up because they say you're not known. I've been to a couple of retailers knocking doors. They're not even willing to listen because of the same or black-owned brands. We've tried them; they don't work. So luckily the export market was much more welcoming and accepting, because I think they've got a longer drinking wine culture and they always want something exciting and new, as long as there's authenticity and a great story about it. So my first break was in the United States.
Okay.
And I went into the United States, and the wines are really appreciated, to an extent that I'm in 34 different states now. So that approach, because I'm also working with a good importer who then understands and sells the wine. So the export becomes a bit simpler to me, but I still have to do the work, be present, do the tastings, even visit the market. And like we're saying, we in the UK as well. But the honest truth about South Africa is, in restaurants where I've worked or where people I have good relationship with, I've been lucky to get a retailer who's not the biggest or not a grocery retailer. It's a macro. I don't know how it equated in the UK. But it's all, they've got 23 stores around the country. At least I can say, okay, go ahead, macro, you find the wines on the shelf. When you start is people see you enjoying the wine and like, okay, can we get it in the local retailer? They don't understand that you have to get distribution, retail. So it's been a challenge. I'm not out of the woods yet, but I think once you create the demand for the brand out there, people then come to request your wine.
Yeah, and I again, it's maybe it's just a personal opinion, but yeah, exactly. Often the people who are closest to you, they only start to appreciate and they start to kind of build up that desire when they see, as you say, you're in 34 states over in the US and you're in the UK and those guys. They must know something, and it's almost like that is then a kind of a seal of approval, and maybe they start to make inquiries. But we just I guess hope they don't make them too late until you've sold all the wine internationally, and they can't get any locally.
And they start complaining again.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I thought it was also interesting. When you mentioned about the UK, so I think that was very interesting that the way that you kind of broke down those different price points and the type of buyer, I guess, that you're after, and and is responding really to what you're kind of putting out there. So I wonder, probably as we look towards closing, give us an insight into who are the people who are kind of responding and what is the feedback from the market through your UK importer Bibendum?
Yeah, so through, obviously they've been in the game for quite some time, and we find the wines are really doing well on trade, restaurants across the UK, and I think the next stage where we've been having a slight of a hiccup is getting into the mainstream retail, and particularly with the other wines that I mentioned, the family style and more of the mid. So my success in the UK has been mostly on the top tier and mid tier, and I guess it has to do with restaurant and food. Remember, the chef I worked for and I really admired is British. So I understood his food, and for me, my wines are more similar suited to that style of cuisine. And UK, with its array of restaurants and top sommeliers, they tend to understand those wines better and more. And it's the strategy we kind of use to get in through. So hopefully in the next year, I'm hoping towards this year, I can get my family range accessible to that clientele I'm trying to target.
Final question, Tinashe. I'll slip this one in, and just to say as well, I've absolutely loved our conversation. I think it's been a great way to kick off the South Africa series, and give us a window and give me a window into that region, which I'm sure is fascinating and is hugely diverse. Please let me and let the listeners know what are the coordinates that they can use to find you, be that online or be that in person, because I'm sure that they'll want to continue the conversation.
Oh, yes. So I'm based in Johannesburg, South Africa, and do my time between Cape Town or Harare. And I'm very social. I'm very active on my social Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. Not yet on TikTok and the other new stuff.
Coming soon.
But yeah, and I've got a very visible and thought-provoking website where you can reach out for me. And
what is the website?
The The website is called kumushabrands.com, and my social media handles are just my name and surname, Tinashe Nyamudoka as well.
Okay, love it.
Maybe if it's worth mentioning, I'm part of the documentary Blind Ambition, which was my first time in the UK. We were launching it at my fair, actually, which coincided with my launch into the UK. So it's called Blind Ambition. It's about 4 Zimbabwean sommeliers who formed a team to compete at the World Blind Tasting Championships. It delves a lot into my upbringing and how I came to have Kumusha. So it's worth watching. I'm sure it's still streaming on all major platforms, Amazon Prime, Apple as well in the UK.
A huge thanks to today's guest, Tinashe Nyamudoka of Kumusha Wines. Make sure you visit kumushabrands.com, where you can learn more about the project and find their main social media handles. Please help to amplify this episode and the South Africa series by sharing the direct link, which is interpretingwine.com/505. You can find links to all 4 series episodes in the description below. And next time on Interpreting Wine South Africa Winemaker series in episode 506, I'll be speaking with Alex Derry of Kearmont Vineyards. Make sure you're subscribed to Interpreting Wine to be alerted when the episode goes live. See you then.